Been too long since we've had some pistols out here, so here we are. Replay submitted by a viewer. We've got a couple of pistoliers with Balthasar leading the way, Hammer of Witches, some flagellants, got some demigryph knights with lances, halberds actually? Yeah, with halberds, interesting. Great swords, a couple of spears up against the Warriors of Chaos, Archaon leading the way, excuse me. We've got some Poison Warhounds, a bunch of Marauders, some Chaos Warriors, Chaos Spawn, which I have been seeing a lot more for the Warriors of Chaos, and I do like that quite a bit. They're very solid monstrous infantry, great overall weapon damage, even though they don't have the best quote-unquote AP, still 160 weapon damage overall is pretty good. And yeah, obviously being unbreakable, very nice. Low defensive stats, pretty squishy, but they won't rout. And yeah, these grenade launchers feeling the pain already as Archaon pressures them away. We've got that Shaggoth in the back too, so nice builds on both sides. Balthasar potentially a bit of a meme pick, and I kind of want to make him the focus of this video since he synergizes so well with pistoliers specifically. He's got Plague of Rust here, no Searing Doom this time, but he does have Final Transmutation, which will be good against the spawn if they get up in a big blob especially. But yeah, Balthasar, what he brings to the table is a Caster Lord, which strangely enough, for the Empire being one of the most well-balanced factions in the game, they only have this one Caster Lord, right? Lord of Metal's also very good, and the fact that he has extra winds of magic from the Staff of Volans is nice. Granted, it is objectively worse and more expensive than Greater Arcane Conduit, because it's basically like, I would need to check the exact values, but I think it's like a Greater Arcane Conduit, but just temporary, more or less. You can stack that with the regular Arcane Conduit, and it makes him a very decent caster. Still not as much winds of magic as somebody like Teclis, probably, but anyway. You can see he does use that Plague of Rust here to go after the Shaggoth as it kind of runs in, and we've got some silver bullets. Obviously, they do still good AP values, but all units do some non-AP as well, and especially these pistoliers here now charging in very aggressively. This is a Dob thing to do, 100%, but gonna get some nice cost-effective damage, kind of pressure the Shaggoth away here, and interesting to see him like running away from pistoliers. Kind of strange, but also these demis in the back line too. Probably don't want to get too tied up on them as they sweep in and clean up those hounds, keep these units safe. So far, Balthasar is just chilling up in the air, and that is one advantage as well. Not the worst stats in the world. 70 charge is pretty decent, and 300 total weapon strength. Not bad for a caster, definitely. The 70 charge in particular is decent. 50 armor as well, and he has some magic resistance if we check in on that. Yeah, 25% magic resistance is a little bit of something. It's not super impactful, but he's not the Fey Enchantress, certainly, but he's got, yeah, that. Nice burning head there from Archaon to roast out the silver bullets. You can see things are potentially looking a little bit rough for the Empire in melee. The pistoliers are out of ammo at this point, which is great for them. They've been able to generate some nice value by using up all that ammo, but can be potentially a tough situation, especially with this Shaggoth still being so healthy. What can they do? Let's see. Looks like Balthasar going to come and drop that Final Transmutation. Has a blob here. It's 2 units only, but still pretty decent value. Chaos Spawn and Chaos Warriors, I guess, also going to finish off this other Chaos Marauder too, so that's pretty decent value, and especially on the Spawn there, since he doesn't have that many great tools for taking them out. He really, like, the demigryph knights obviously would, but he needs them available to be able to take out this Shaggoth here. Nice Flaming Sword of Ruin there, and it looks like some of these pistoliers do still have some ammo left, so potential for a nice Plague of Rust there. But even just as it is right now, sheer volume of the pistoliers definitely making their presence felt against this big bad Shaggoth here. You can see great swords also charging in, a desperate last stand for Sigmar. Balance power still very close at this point. Demis with a nice rear charge here along with the flagellants and spears. Going to finish off, literally just wipe those spawn on that charge. And now they can wheel over and start to try and take on the Shaggoth. The Warriors of Chaos pushing forward here. Literal Chaos Warriors pushing forward. Going to push those pistoliers away, but they're mostly out of ammo. The grenade launcher is doing a good job also at this point. 115, almost 200 kills. Actually, the Plague of Rust plus grenade launchers. Grenade launchers already do decent AP, but that would potentially be absolutely devastating against any armored unit, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, I mean about the pistoliers, and pistoliers are obviously very good, but that is another pretty direct synergy that you could potentially see here. I mean, the 2 single entities could be a problem, though. There's not a lot of great stopping power outside of the demis. One of the units is basically gone at this point. The other one is still fully healthy, so question is, with all this support, do the demis, can they win this fight? I would say probably, given the amount of support that the Empire does still have left. And of course, that might mean Balthasar himself having to cycle charge in the late game. Once the Shaggoth is gone, I mean, Archaon still will just destroy him, but Archaon does magic damage. He's got that little bit of magic resistance. And with the 70 charge, if he gets really opportunistic kind of hit-and-run charges on Archaon, that will be able to generate some good value there. But here come the demis on their charge. They're going to, again, wipe the spawn. Archaon actually manages to disentangle, but the other group of demis makes their valiant last charge and tries to hold him up. Not going to be enough, though, as the Shaggoth and Archaon are able to get on the silver bullets there. Got some more Marauders and such coming back here. A little bit of over-chasing probably on some infantry units, but this cannon crew also hanging around, kind of just chilling here. If they can get an opportunity to get back on their guns, yeah, they're over here. Actually, they might all be destroyed. Yep, looks like all three of the guns have been exploded by spawn. So that's unfortunate, but not too bad. Balthasar again just chilling here. He's used up a lot of Winds of Magic on that final transmutation. He might still be able to get one more, or just keep spamming that Plague of Rust. So that, you know, as these Flagellants and other units try and grind down Archaon in the late game here, they'll have a little bit of an easier time. Demis obviously have AP, but again, they do have a little bit of non-AP as well, right? Not much, but actually 17 base weapon damage. So yeah, even against quote-unquote AP units, debuffing armor of a very heavy target like Archaon can still be worth it on occasion. But I don't think Balthasar has Winds of Magic. Unfortunately, it looks like he does pop Staff of Volans there, trying to get a little bit more. Nice Flaming Sword of Ruin from Archaon, give a little damage spike with the Kindle Flame and everything. But the Outriders and Pistoliers have been able to clean up a lot of these chaff units, doing a great job there. And just make sure those routing units don't come back. And that will start to turn the balance of power now that the Shaggoth's down. It's just Archaon and his Marauders versus the Demis. Nice little side shot from the Silver Bullets there. These Demis could actually get worn down. Yeah, you see that? They're just about done at this point. So, it's going to be Balthasar and some tattered calves. So I think we might actually see a wild Balthasar cycle charge here in the late game. Let's see. The Marauders come in. It looks like they get hit hard by the Outriders, but they don't actually probably take that much damage. Maybe a little something. The Silver Bullets trying to use up the rest of what they got. They do have magic damage against Archaon's physical resistance, so it's decent. But I don't think they have enough ammo, considering how few unit models. 36 unit models, perhaps. Archaon now chasing away the Demis, making sure they don't come back. As a result, the Marauders could get singled out a little bit here. And Gelt, just by virtue of being up in the air and being safe from the Chaos Force this entire time, is an advantage, obviously. Having a caster up in the air, especially, it can cast some nice spells to support your army. He's also not too expensive, which is another benefit of these kind of cheaper caster lords, right? Definitely not as good as the top tier of caster lords like the Fey Enchantress or Alariel, just because, I mean, obviously healing is one thing, but his bound, he doesn't have any bound abilities either, which kind of puts him below a lot of the legendary casters, a lot of the other legendary casters. I would like to see Balthasar maybe get a little bit more of something. I was honestly expecting them to give him a little bit more in the rework, but here's where that Balthasar charge bonus comes into effect, and again, he really doesn't want to stay long at all against Archaon if he can help it, but popping in here gets a little bit of a chunk damage right there, and just continuing to do that as much as he can. It's going to be okay. Saturated in, like, with these other targets, too. He won't take as much damage. But, yeah, Balthasar, you can see, taking relatively little there. Looks like there are some Marauders back over here as well. So the Outriders were like, oh, maybe we should actually go help against the Marauders. And Balthasar comes through one last glorious rear charge against the Lord of the End Times. Silver Bullets disengaging, and he manages to rout him, force army losses. So how about that? Balthasar coming in the late game, delivering opportunistic end blow to the Lord of the End Times, and a nice fun game. A big thanks to Deadly Bunnies for sending that one in. very close back and forth kind of battle. The Spawn did a good job mulching in the front line, but did they end up actually paying for themselves? It's hard to say. They are more expensive than the Flagellants, so trading them into the Flagellants isn't necessarily great. The Chaos Warriors, on the other hand, absolutely paid for themselves, as did Archaon. 147 kills, great job with the Flaming Heads and so on. 167 for the Grenade Launchers, they were definitely a bright spot. Having the Demis in the late game, too, to take out that Shaggoth was super key. Even though the Flagellant line didn't get a lot of kills, the kills they did get were pretty impactful. And keeping in mind that Balthasar charged down into combat maybe like twice, 3 times there at the late game, all 51 of those kills pretty much are from the final transmutations, which is pretty impressive. I mean, I guess there was only really the one big one there that I caught, but that in and of itself, even though it might not seem like it, you know, maybe there's an argument to be made that you should go after the blob of Archaon and the Shaggoth, but considering they're very fast, they can kind of maneuver out of that, right? And getting that, the Spawn plus the... Well, were there even Spawn in that blob? I don't know. Anyway, let's move on from that and just quickly finish up with old Gelt boy here. He's definitely a fun one to play, and with the Empire, if there's a matchup in particular where you feel safe taking him up in the air, then that's a good potential matchup where you can bring him. Something like Tomb Kings is one that I've used him in the past against pretty consistently. Warriors of Chaos does have some flying tools, but I mean, the Manticore you can kind of manage. They do have the ones that don't enrage, but those are relatively expensive as well, and you can kind of get around that with missile support and some other things. Balthasar also very fast up in the air. With the evasion, he goes up to, what, 110 speed, something like that. And Lore of Metal, like I said, just a fantastic lore. You can do a lot with it, but supporting cavalry engagements with Searing Doom can be quite nice. In terms of, yeah, matchups, like I said, Chaos and Tomb Kings are ones that spring to mind because they have some key expensive heavy units. You can also be relatively safe up in the air against them. Greenskins as well is another one. Doom Divers could be a danger here, as is Azag. But also, again, you only have to deal with the one flying unit, right? So if you can kind of manage Azag, then Gelt can get some pretty good value there. That being said, he's going to die pretty quick to anything the Greenskins bring in melee. And yeah, I would argue that Lore of Metal, while it is very good, I don't know if it's necessarily the optimal pick against Greenskins. But potentially you could make him work there. That is a tough one. Greenskins are very strong, but High Elves, I would say, is a hard no. They have a very strong Air Force. Lizardmen probably is also a no, just because, I mean, they can bring a very powerful Air Force, and they sometimes will in this matchup, specifically to try and counter Carl in the air. So it's a little bit risky. You could take him on the ground too, and he gets even cheaper, but at that point he's pretty squishy. I mean, granted, because the Empire is such a well-balanced faction, having a very cheap caster lord is a benefit, in that you can take a very wide army, and especially like some quote-unquote non-AP troops, something like, you know, some crossbowmen, Free Company, Pistoliers, obviously I talked about, but just all of these units, you can make them work a lot better, and even something like Reiksguard too. Or Knights of the Blazing Sun, probably more efficient to buff them with Kindle Flame, but you could always take 2 casters and do both. You know, throw that Plague of Rust in when these 2 Shock Cavalry are charging with their quote-unquote non-AP, you know, high charge, high weapon damage. They'll do a significant amount more to any armored units with the support of Balthasar. So, yeah, actually, in the past, I have run Balthasar into against Tomb Kings with a Firecaster as well. Because you get that extra Winds of Magic, you can kind of justify having that second caster with even like just Fireball only, or maybe Fireball and Cascading Fire Cloak if you have Demis as well. But yeah, Lizardman's probably a no. Norska's one that you actually maybe could use Balthasar against. Again, like Famir, Plague of Rusting, Famir, and blasting him with Pistolier is going to be pretty good. Searing Doom also not too bad. They're not likely to bring something like a Frostworm. Manticore maybe, but it's like I said, with Chaos basically you can kind of manage there. And the Plague of Rust, while it might not seem super important, Norska's not typically known as a heavy armor faction. I mean, you think about the heavy armor units they do have. Mammoths are obviously a big one, and they only have 70 armor, which means that an overcast Plague of Rust takes them down to 10 armor, right? And at that point, your lower tier high DPS missile units, like again, crossbows, Free Company, Pistoliers, Grenade Outriders will just blast them, absolutely blast them. So Norska is another one where you could potentially do it. Skaven is risky because you've got Howling Warp Gale, but they can't directly challenge you in the air, so if you can keep them from getting shot in the air, that's a viable option as well, excuse me. And Coast, I don't know, he's very vulnerable to getting sniped by Harkon, so that's probably a no. Same thing with Counts, like they have a very strong air force as well, so it's going to be tough to make him work. And Wood Elves also fall into that category. So yeah, probably I would say your Chaos factions, Beastmen also included in that, didn't really talk about them, but your, like, yeah, Dwarfs also potentially. But your Chaos kind of Rush factions, Greenskins maybe, it's an interesting one. And then, of course, Tomb Kings, like I mentioned. Yeah, all in all, Balthasar, definitely give him a consideration. I know a lot of the focus in the meta right now is on Karl and on Volkmar, but Balthasar is definitely an option you should consider, especially if you want to take a nice wide army. So thanks, guys. That's all for today. We'll see you next time.